Welcome to the Empowering Industry Podcast, a production from Empowering Pumps and Equipment as the voice of the pump and related equipment industries. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Empowering Industry Podcast. I'm your host, Charli Matthews, and I'm excited about this one. I love podcasts where I get to learn a little bit, and we have multiple guests today, so even better. And I will just start with letting them introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Don. Give us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Don Daly with Regal Rexnord. Been with the organization for about 25 years. Been in the industry for about 35 years. Live in Houston, Texas area, and have been dealing with couplings and pumps and gas compression for pretty much the majority of my career.
Yeah, and I also am curious of why couplings, and so both of y'all can kind of answer that. But Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name's Chris Jackson. I've been with the company coming up on 8 years. The 7 of them I was with Ultramotion, who was acquired by Regal Rexnord in March of last year. So with Regal Rexnord, it's been a year that I've been with them. My past, I was applications for disc couplings, and then I dealt with a little bit of gear couplings, and then came back to product management on the disc coupling side, and then now commercial support for all Regal Rexnord disc couplings.
So y'all heard a lot about couplings, and we're just curious, how does someone get into couplings? Is that like the thing in industry? Just tell us a little bit about why.
I mean, for me personally, it's kind of about just the nature of the geography that I live in along the Gulf Coast. And prior to the Texas Gulf Coast, I was on the Louisiana Gulf Coast. So they're just with refineries and chemical plants and things like that. Couplings just is a natural, it's a natural fit, so to speak, with all of the industry, in that region.
Yeah, and Regal Rexnord does have a lot of different kinds of couplings, and I think it's important that we understand, like, what is a coupling, what is the different types. I know I've seen it, they both on compression side of things, so compressors, but also I've heard a lot in the pump side. So I think we're going to talk a little bit more on the gas compression side of things today. But could you tell me a little bit more about just couplings in general for our audience to educate them?
Go ahead, Chris. I'll let you.
You
deal with the disc stuff, and we'll double team the rest of it.
That works. I was going to say, similar to Don, the reason that, I kind of got into disc couplings and gas compression in Texas is a huge market. And so we have several manufacturing plants kind of in the South. And so, there's a lot of opportunities for disc couplings in, this region alone. So that's kind of how I got into it. So your question was kind of why disc couplings?
Yeah, for sure. Like, why? I mean, it sounds like they're used and reused.
Yeah.
Used. So why are they needing coupling so much?
Sure. So couplings, it's often one of those things that can be forgot about. You're dealing with pumps, you're dealing with motors, that are very expensive. So couplings are one of those things that, can be forgotten about, but it's very important. In gas compression, which we'll talk a lot about today, it's pretty rough applications, reversing loads, where disc couplings can excel just because they're backlash free. Typically, there's not much maintenance involved with disc couplings. So disc couplings really can excel in that market. And then, we also have torsionally soft couplings as well, elastomeric couplings that Don's a little more familiar with, that we can talk about as well. But you see those in these applications as well, more so when you have electric motors with VFDs.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard a lot about that. Those currents do something, right?
Something.
Yeah. Tell us about it, Don.
I'm sure they do, but that's a different podcast for electrical learning. Now, but to your basic question of what are couplings, so you are correct. Couplings are used across the spectrum. They connect, basically you're connecting two shafts, and the coupling itself is there to connect those two shafts to provide for a certain level of misalignment capability, and also to transmit the torque. So in other words, if you have a driver and then you have a driven, each one of those could have let's say they both have shafts. The coupling fits between those two shafts that connects the driver to the driven. Without the coupling, those two pieces of equipment just sit there idle.
So, I mean, I'm curious how long a coupling lasts. I mean, I feel like we talk a lot about couplings in this industry, and I hear a lot about, but once you kind of put it all together, you want it to run. How long does this last, or what does this maintenance look like?
Depending on which style of coupling and what your application is, take for instance a disc coupling. Inherently is designed for infinite life, taking into consideration that it meets all the criteria of the coupling. In other words, it's sized correctly, the alignment is correct, there aren't any upsets in the system process. So, that's on one spectrum, where on elastomeric couplings, a lot of those are, I guess, the lifespan of those couplings, everything being correct, you still have a life expectancy of the urethane or the rubber type elements. So it kind of, it varies across the board.
Okay.
And disc couplings can really excel here. Just, I mean, 20, 30 years is not uncommon to hear. Every once in a while we'll get customers that send in a request, for a coupling that was hand drawn. So, I mean, it's not uncommon to see disc couplings out in the field running 20, 30 years.
Okay. So kind of that main difference between a disc coupling and elastomeric is how long it lasts, or is there a main difference between the two other than kind of that longevity?
Well, that's a trick question. I mean, inherently, a disc coupling is typically for higher horsepower applications than you would see. And when we talk about elastomeric couplings, we have elastomeric couplings for high horsepower applications, but we also have one for the 1 horsepower, pump application. So it varies on the application. But of course, price point is always that's always a consideration. Then you have temperature, corrosion, and then we haven't even talked about lubricated couplings versus non-lubricated couplings, which that would be your gear and your grid style couplings, which also serve a purpose in the industry as well.
Absolutely. And, I think that there's a lot about kind of understanding what the customer needs, looking at like what equipment they have, what are they trying to do. But, I'm trying to think through, a plant and a maintenance manager, and you've kind of got this predictive maintenance or preventative maintenance plan. Do y'all work? I mean, I assume you do. You work directly with the client on that to, help them decide which couplings to use based on what they have.
Yeah, so basic sizing, we'll get the request, we'll look at what the motor engine is, we'll look at what the compressor is, we'll look at, how many cylinders, how many throws both of them have, and then we'll come up with a service factor, and we'll do an initial sizing. Then at that point, we'll relay that information. It'll go to a TVA, or a torsional vibration consultant. They'll look at the complete package and they'll say, will this coupling withstand the vibratory torque of this application or not? And do we need to modify it? We can modify it with an inertia ring, which is basically just bolting on a giant flywheel to the coupling. Or we can go to a soft coupling, like Don was talking about, a torsionally soft coupling. So that's kind of the process that we follow. And then, if customers have a preference, or if they know from past experience, which coupling or which style coupling works best, then we'll also, we'll start from there.
Okay, I'm also seeing some stuff about a disc pack. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so a disc pack is unique to the disc style coupling, hence the name. And the disc pack is made up of a bunch of individual blades that are bolted together. So the disc pack is essentially the heart of the coupling that allows the misalignment, and it also transmits the torque through those disc packs. So that's really the heart of the disc of the coupling itself.
So I just over the years, I know how important alignment is, but you just said helps with the misalignment. So
Mhm.
can you can you just explain why we're trying to do that?
Right. Yeah. So all systems have some misalignment built into it. That's why you can't just rigidly connect, the motor to the pump. So each coupling has its strengths. Some can handle more misalignment, some can handle less. Typically for the most part, we're looking at 8-bolt style couplings for disc packs, which handle about a third of a degree misalignment. So it's not going to be your highest misalignment style coupling, but for these applications, it's typically enough, to handle it. One note, that it was brought up earlier, but we often hear disc packs referred to as shim packs. And I just want to take this moment to explain that, disc packs are not shim packs. So they are built up of individual blades, but shim packs kind of implies you can add or take away if you need to adjust your spacing. And that's not what we're trying to do with disc pack style couplings. The disc packs are a predetermined thickness, and that is, the way that they're set up to run. So you don't want to add or take away any of the blades from the disc pack.
I love that. And I saw you smiling back there, Don, because some of these questions that I ask, I know they're like a little bit of knowledge. I always say I know just enough to be dangerous, but being in these plants or walking through and seeing like the pump and the motor all connected there and thinking it's going to ship out, I'm always like, thinking like, how is that going to stay perfect? And so it's nice to hear that there is some of that misalignment built in to take care of that. So I learned something today. Always great. The little, yeah. Did you say,
Perfect.
yeah, perfect. Don said, okay, we're done now, y'all. No, but I think that there's so much to learn, and couplings. I think it's one of those things that when we talk about it, everybody is curious and wanting to learn more about it. And especially, in our readership. And I think that when we do, ask those silly questions, if you will, then it does clarify things for people and why they should use it. And so I think that that was really important. The shims we've heard of for many years, but you're setting this up, and this is what you hope that it needs, right? That this is, I say hope, but y'all got the technical side of that down, right?
Yeah, we're a little
That it's
more
what you need.
precise than hope, but and one other thing I'd like to add is we're not, the couplings are designed, and it's irregardless of whether it's disc or elastomeric, they're designed to handle a certain amount of misalignment. But the one of the questions that myself, and I'm sure Chris has heard this too, is, it's like how much misalignment, can the coupling take? And we don't like to base coupling selection off of the worst case scenario. And we're not necessarily aligning the coupling, we're aligning the two shafts that we're connecting. So it's what we realize is, you're not going, your chances of being perfect of the two shafts being aligned is very rare. So that's that's one of the main purposes or reasons why there's couplings.
Perfect.
And they allow for changes too over time. So, thermal growth, settling of the foundation, things like that. There's going to be changes over time. And that's where, the couplings really come into play, is, they allow for those changes.
Excellent. And, there's so much because y'all got into couplings, y'all love couplings. There's so much to give us as far as information, but what would y'all give, our listeners just in general about couplings? What would you want them to know? Y'all can both take that in any order.
Chris, I'll
I mean,
defer to you.
yes, there's so much. I guess one thought that I had, while we're talking a lot about alignment and misalignment capabilities. I guess one note I'll kind of add to that is when you align a coupling, you're aligning it for the benefit of the equipment itself. So you're not necessarily aligning it for the coupling, but you're aligning it to get better performance and better life out of your equipment.
Very good. Dawn?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I guess one of the, if you're new to, either needing couplings, trying to, size a motor to a pump and this and that, there's more than just, I mean, initially we start with horsepower, speed, shaft separation, size of your shafts. But then there are other factors to consider. Again, temperature, whether there's corrosion in the atmosphere, whether it's a reciprocating driver like an engine versus an electric motor. All of those factors play into what needs to be considered before you just say, I want this style of coupling or that style of coupling. So that's, it's a lot, out of the connected equipment, whether it be an engine to a compressor or an electric motor to a pump. The coupling is going to be the least expensive article out of those combinations. If you oversize it, you can break the expensive stuff. If you undersize it, it fails prematurely. So there are considerations, that you don't have to be a coupling expert, but you do need to, consider more than just the this or the that. One, you can't take it, myopically. You kind of have to look a whole lot holistically.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think that there's so many things that we do have to consider, and that's why it's important to talk to the customer. One thing that I'm really curious about is just how y'all got into the industry itself. Like what, on our podcast, we always, and so when we have one person, we focus in on that person's journey or whatever. But I am curious just what brought you into that. What's your background there that brought you into industry? Christopher, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. So I studied mechanical engineering in school. So rotating equipment was, a heavy focus in my program. And when I graduated, I was looking for jobs and this one popped up. And, being in Texas, being in, the heart of kind of the gas compression world, it was a good opportunity for me. And I'm really glad that I did it. I've enjoyed it so far.
Yeah. And, Don talked a little bit about this earlier, but just like location wise and kind of being in the industry, it makes sense to go into energy. Don, was that like your beginning story, how you got into the space?
Sort of, kind of. I started out in industrial distribution. That was my major from Texas A&M University.
All right, go
I gotta give
Aggies.
a shout out. Now, so I started in distribution, and which is, distributors represent various manufacturers of, various products. So I did that for about, I don't know, 10 years. And then I went to a manufacturer that was, we were dealing with pump OEMs on the seal side of stuff. And then that kind of transgressed into this job with Rexnord, which between having sold the product as a distributor and then having dealt with pump OEMs and pump manufacturers with my other job, just kind of, again, back to the geography of the area and with my previous background, it just kind of, I don't know if I fell into its lap or it fell into my lap.
Well, they needed you that because you have to understand the equipment as a whole, which is what is I'm hearing and what I see just in energy industry in general. If we can educate our people on the products, if they have a general understanding, is really great. And then, coming in, Chris, I love your side of the story of coming out of college into this space, and kind of learning. It is valuable, right? It's valuable to everyone. The energy space is so important. And if we can save some of that energy by running our equipment the way that it should be and maintaining it, I'm for that. So there's a lot of different aspects there. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say something that you just said I think is really important, and that's sharing the knowledge with the industry and with our customers, because we want them to be informed about, couplings, when's the right coupling to use, what's the right maintenance, what's the right alignment, how do you size and select, we're here as the experts to offer assistance. But the more that they know, the better off, the coupling will be and the better life that they'll see out of a coupling.
So one last thing on couplings, if somebody wants to buy a coupling, how fast can they get it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
It
great
depends.
question. So, I mean, and here's a great answer. It all depends. I mean, throughout our distributor network, there are various styles and types of couplings that, you could walk into one of our local distributors and buy a coupling right then and there. And some of the stuff at the OEM level, where we're actually, trying to apply specific parameter or meet specific parameters, there's engineering involved and things like that. Of course, it takes longer. So there's no set answer. I don't know that there's a good answer or a bad answer or a right answer or a wrong answer, other than it really depends on the nature of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I also know, just for the people kind of maybe new to energy industry, oil and gas, et cetera, relationships matter. And so I know that that's important, and kind of understanding where the customer is and knowing what they need, when they need it, how critical is it. I think that plays into a lot of our decisions. Okay, so I do have to ask you a little rapid fire before I let you go, because that's just fun for me. But also our audience gets to know you. And so these questions are a little fun. What's your favorite book? And just both of you can answer. I see Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I'm trying to think of.
Do you read books? Or is this...
So I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old right now, so I've kind of haven't been reading as much as I used to.
Well,
One fish, two fish.
yeah, exactly. That's where my head went. But I listen to podcasts a lot, so there's that. Dawn, do you have one?
I don't know that I have a favorite book. I typically read. As my wife describes it, I'm a slow reader, and I don't like nonfiction. So I kind of stick with the other stuff.
Yeah, yeah. What about music? Y'all got any favorite music? Bands, songs?
I'm up for, anywhere from Gary P. Nunn to Jelly Roll to, you name it, to AC/DC to,
Uh-huh. You
across
like
the
Yeah,
all.
spectrum. Yeah.
I'm I'm kind of all over the place too. I'm anywhere from country to rock is what I typically listen to.
Awesome. Okay, so on a more I guess industry helpfulness to everyone, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Man.
Don't worry about asking the question. Ask the question.
That's good.
Yeah, there's no dumb question, I guess, as Don said, we get questions all the times from all the customers. There's really no dumb question. They're all good questions. Sometimes they make us think too. So
So my last question is, if you can talk to a young professional coming in, what advice would you give them?
again, I would go back to don't not ask the question, because if you don't ask the question and you make assumptions, then you know what assumptions do. So we don't want to go down that road. And to Chris's point, there's really no dumb question. And even though you may think that I should already know that, but if you don't know that, the only way you're going to learn that is to ask the question. So asking questions is key, whether you're on our side of the table asking the customer questions, or the customer from their point of view asking us questions. It's communication, it's understanding, trying to get the whole picture that we're trying to solve for. So the only way I've ever found to do that is to ask questions.
Me too. Christopher, you got anything else outside of questions?
Yeah, I would say, just find out who those experts are, who you can talk to, and really just try to absorb everything that you can from them. That's what I've found works. Don't worry about becoming necessarily an expert in everything, because I mean, there's so much out there. But if you can find those people that you can rely on, over time, you'll realize looking back that you've picked up quite a bit over the years.
Well, excellent. Well, if people do want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that? Just website?
Don,
Yeah.
call Don.
Yeah. Call Dawn. Dawn's the expert on our call. So if you have any questions, ask Dawn.
Yeah, just call me. BR549 is the phone number. But no, I mean, I guess I mean that's a tough. I mean, email is phone call, either way, anyway. And that can be, I mean, and I don't know where they're at or where they're located. So, I mean, we have offices, globally, and, but we answer questions, you can get on our website and find either a local place, or, if you can't, get hold of that, then, we're available.
Excellent. And I will put the website in the show notes so people can check that out. And thanks for letting me ask questions today and learn a little bit more about couplings. I think that it's so important that we do that and we share that information. So thanks for what you're doing. And until next time, everybody, be empowering.